Hi, I'm Nikki.
And I'm Steph.
Welcome to the Unstoppable Podcast.
This is the podcast where we sit down, have coffee, and chat about all things health, wellness, mental health, and what it means to be an unstoppable woman.
Episode 4. Wow.
I love today's topic. I think I just said that about episode 3 as well. But what I like about today's topic is we're going to talk about nutrition. And I feel like food is like one of those things, right?
It's one of those topics that there is a lot of education, there's a lot of opinions, there's a lot of research still coming out, and sometimes it can be quite overwhelming. But I'm really, really excited to get into this topic and keep it nice and simple. We don't need to speak in scientific terms, but we're just going to make sure that you guys as the listeners can understand what we're saying and maybe take a few key points away from this episode.
So nutrition is such a big topic. And what makes it even a bigger topic is because we don't know everything about nutrition, because we definitely don't know everything about the human body, let alone the female body. So today we're going to keep it very generalized, and we're going to talk about the nutrition mistakes that are keeping women stuck.
Which I feel like there is so many things that we see in our community that we could talk about for days on end. I feel like we're going to say that for every episode. But this is such a topic that I think women struggle with a lot. And people, I think, overcomplicate this topic as well. But yeah.
In its purest form, I think we have to start off by saying, you know, as women, we're massively emotional human beings. And for us to sit here and go, you know what, my emotions have nothing to do with my food. Well, I'm going to call every single person out on that, because your emotions have everything to do with your food, because we as human beings, as animals essentially, we are the only mammals on this planet that have choices around whether we choose to eat or choose not to. For the rest of, you know, the large majority of different mammals on this planet, it's an innate nature. We eat when we're hungry, we eat for survival, we eat for reproduction, and we have to be able to look at nutrition from two different facets, from the human being element of emotional connection and the human physiology element of what does your body need to function optimally as a human being every day of your life.
100%. And I think sometimes it's really hard, and women tend to put themselves in one basket or the other. Like, it's either my goals are big, I want to lose however many kilos on the scales or body fat or whatever it may be, or you're the opposite end, and you eat everything that you want to enjoy, but then we get into the negativity around that. So I think sometimes it is hard to balance both, but I believe both are incredibly important for not only to perform optimally and recover optimally, but also to live life and enjoy the chocolate if you want to have the chocolate.
Absolutely. And we're going to speak to both ends of the spectrum. So let's start with eating too little. You know, the amount of conversations I have with, but I eat enough. And what does that actually even mean? Like, I eat enough. Is that the size of the meal on your plate? Is that caloric density, the way that the food is actually made out of energy? What does it actually mean to be able to eat enough? And the other side of that is, how do you know? You know, some days I could eat my whole left arm off, and some days I am not even interested in food and I could go the whole day without eating if I went and fully gave control into purely just how I was feeling. I think we tend to feel like we're eating enough because our body is incredibly smart at being able to adapt at what it's given. So if you have been eating less caloric intake than what your body needs to perform optimally for a long period of time, then your body will actually adapt to that and get used to its new normal. And this is a survival mechanism. You know, we have 100% success rate our body has 100% success rate of keeping us alive up until this point. So it knows that what it's done in the past, eating less or just eating the same level of food, the same meals consistently, that definitely is something that our body can adapt to. It's something that it will naturally adapt to from a physiological standpoint, not just a mental standpoint. But the mental point comes in with, but I've always eaten this. I always want to eat this level. And I think the challenge then becomes, if we want to be different, sometimes we need to do, well, most of the time we need to do different things. And the challenge therefore becomes, if you don't like the way that you are feeling, or the way that your body is performing, or maybe you're feeling like you have low energy all the time, or you just feel a bit, spacey, that these can all be signs that your body's actually telling you that you're eating too little. But I feel like we naturally feel like we should be getting hunger cues from things like tummy rumbles. And if we're not feeling tummy rumbles, then we're not really feeling hungry. I know personally my hunger cues come from in the form of brain fog. They come in the form of I get shaky hands. They come in the form of dry mouths and not being able to actually put my words properly together in a sentence. And coming from someone who has sat at the extreme ends of eating too little, you can definitely feel the impact of sitting there for a prolonged period of time. But because our body gets so well at adapting to it, sometimes we don't even realize what that could possibly feel like.
And I think on that, your body is beautiful at adapting to whatever we give it. And sometimes is it the detriment to our health and how we feel, especially when we're talking about too little. I know personally for the clients that I have, I would say 80% of the clients I have, I've encouraged them to eat more because their body wasn't changing the way they wanted it to by eating so little. So, and I also want to acknowledge that society and social media and skinny talk or whatever you want to call it, it's not just you that is the reason for eating too little. And that is so incredibly hard sometimes to be able to get your head around. Like, I'm eating less, so I should be seeing my body change the way I want it to. But like you said, Steph, we kind of have to change something if we want to see something change. Majority of the time, it's not just the habits that you've adapted over time that have caused you to eat too little, or the things you tell yourself. Sometimes it's actually from external things in your environment, what generation you grew up. So acknowledging that it's a mental game, not just only a how much food do we need to actually thrive and feel better, to be able to work through on eating too little. Yeah.
And I feel like we have to touch on the fact, especially when we're talking too little, the allied health professional space. As trainers, as coaches, we have a duty of care to be able to refer across to allied health professionals when it comes to relationship with food. And that's really, really important, because when we talk about nutrition, we're talking about the level of calorie density, the quality of food coming into your body to help it survive. But the mental space, the mental relationship around food, around eating, especially things like eating disorders, things can become quite negative quite quickly. So working with allied health professionals to really understand what your relationship with nutrition feels like from the inside can be one of the most powerful things that you possibly step into. And I know that over my years of coaching beautiful women, I've had some very, very powerful conversations about working with understanding your own very particular, very individual relationship around food.
100%. And that's where we lean into, like, as a coach, we lean into allied health professionals, whether it be dietitians, nutritionists, doctors, and then we have a conversation with how the session went with that, or even talking directly to the allied health professionals and being like, what can we do to be able to support this client better? But I just wanted to acknowledge that it's not just you. We have so much social media and environment around us that sometimes it can feel like it's all your fault, and it's not. So if you're anybody who is feeling this way, it's not just you, it's social media, it's your environment, it's the people you spend your time with as well. But yes, eating too little is something that doesn't fuel your body enough to be able to feel safe.
And our education and support is always going to come from a place of being able to help you perform optimally, to be the strongest human being that you possibly can be from every facet of mind, body, and soul. And for us to be able to ask more things from our body, to be able to ask it to perform optimally, I know from personal experience under eating and the impact that that has on your emotion, not just emotional regulation, but overall hormonal regulation as well. The lack of basically encouraging the body for, to do what it's designed for. For as a female, that's reproduction. It's one of our biggest health indicators is a healthy natural menstrual cycle, and under eating can massively impact that, not just by complete absent cycles or a prolonged delayed cycle, but because the body will prioritize energy to go into a state of survival. What am I running away from? Where's the lion? Versus prioritizing reproduction or healthy hormone regulation throughout every part of your life, which obviously has a massive impact, not just when you have a regular cycle, but also later on in life as a female, in particular, going into menopause and post-menopause as our bodies start to shift and change too.
Yeah, 100%. And I love that you mentioned like moving through that stage of life, Steph, because it actually goes against everything that you've probably learnt from skinny talk and social media and all that sort of stuff. When you do get to that phase, your hormones aren't helping you as much as they are when you're younger. So if you were in a deficit when you were 29 and you were losing body fat, and you want to do a fat loss phase when you're 49, 59, it's not going to look the same, and you might have to eat a little more, which I think is a common misconception that I see a lot of women come to me for, is like, I'm 59 years old, I'm post-menopause, I'm on HRT, but I want to do a deficit and lose body fat, so I need to eat the same amount or eat even less than what I was on when I was younger. And that is not helpful for your body, and I like to encourage I call them my recovery pillars, and they're sleep, food, hydration, and stress. If automatically our stresses from our hormones not supporting our body enough is down, your sleep is also down because you're going through postmenopause. If you're also not eating enough food, your body's not going to feel safe to change. And I think no matter what end of the spectrum we're talking about, whether it be eating too less or eating too much, if your body's not feeling safe, it is not going to change the way you want it to. And food is an incredibly important recovery pillar that I like to encourage all of my clients to step into and get curious about how that recovery pillar is supporting their body into their change, that they want to see.
That's a massive, massive point there, Nikki, too. Like, talking about the mistakes that help keep women stuck. Like, what feels more stuck than, but I used to do this, why isn't it working anymore? And the fact that we have to step in with a place of curiosity. What worked for you when you were a teenager, your early 20s, will not work for you when you're pushing through different stages of life. And that's not just necessarily your years on the planet, but it's habits and routines as well. Maybe life's more stressful. Maybe you're sleeping a bit less. Maybe you've had kids. And that's therefore looks completely different to you than what was happening previously. But regardless of what phase of life you're in or what you're stepping into, your body still needs the love and support by quality and adequate nutrition levels. 100%. So I guess that kind of flows into the age-old saying, the amount of times I've had conversations of, but I only want to do this Monday to Friday, and then can I have my weekends to do whatever I want to do, right? Like the fact that our goals tend to stop on the days that start an S, because there are way more exciting things to do than be, tracking my food and eating my protein and making sure I hit my fiber levels, than I want to go out and do all the things. And I feel like the weekend tends to come with an element of freedom, flexibility, and sometimes an element of sabotage.
Definitely. And I think I look at sometimes the weekends, and I see my clients look at the weekends as, I've got a really good routine Monday to Friday because I'm working, and then the weekend hits, and we generally, most of the population don't work on the weekend. So my routine is kind of up in the air. And I think the weekend can go one of two ways. I know for me personally, sometimes with the weekend, I actually eat less than what I do throughout the week because I'm doing things like cleaning, because I'm doing things that I more so enjoy and maybe don't have as many of those stresses allocated, or not allocated, but more stresses around in on the weekend.
Absolutely. I feel like weekends come with that level, like you named, social element, right? So it feels like we need to be, we're out more, like you named, a bit of a lack of routine. And I see that as a bit of a possibility to dial up your processes. You know, with great power comes great responsibility. So if you want to step into the weekend and enjoy yourself, then what does that enjoyment actually look like? For many people, like you named, we focus with that dedication when routine is consistent, when life feels consistent. And I guess weekends can also flow into things like holidays or traveling outside of your normal routine. You might have gone to see family interstate, and therefore the whole process, the habit, the routine, the foundations and structures that you had in place in a normal routine therefore go out the window. But that power that comes with responsibility is that if we choose to be flexible, then how much flexibility are we actually giving ourselves, and how do we know what that looks like? I love, and have chatted about before, in terms of understanding nutrition. I felt that there was so much power that came into my world when I actually understood that not all foods were created equally. When we talk about eating enough or eating too little, we're not necessarily just talking about food volume, like how big is the food on your plate. We're talking about nutrient density. We're talking about energy availability in terms of caloric density. And, being able to actually understand what food is made out of, at least to a baseline level, means that we can step into the weekend with information and being able to be armed with tools that help to keep us on track, even if we release the reins just a little bit to be able to allow for that life flexibility.
I definitely think you make a good point there about knowing what you're actually consuming. And I love to encourage ladies that we first start with, that are first stepping into this health and fitness journey, to do one of two things. We can either start with education on how to track through something like MyFitnessPal or Chronometer, or we can send food photos. And that's not necessarily just for them to bring awareness to what they're having and be a bit more mindful, but also for us as coaches to be able to educate. Hey, we've got a chicken schnitzel, veg, and chips on our plate. Beautiful thing. Would we add anything to it? Do you know how many carbs are in chips, or how much protein's in a chicken schnitzel? And I think it's really important at some stage in your journey, in your health and fitness journey, to be able to track your food. I personally don't believe tracking should be something you have to do to be able to succeed and get towards your goals. However, I do think it's a necessary thing to be able to build your education around what actually does food have in it, because you'll be surprised about the amount of things that you have that you maybe have a little bit of in excess, like barbecue sauce or tomato sauce or any sort of those condiments. They are the things that have those little bit more caloric increase in them. So I think it's important to be able to track at some stage of your journey, but it's not forever, and it doesn't have to be a continuous thing if that doesn't serve you or your season of life that you're in.
100%. And I love that you named seasons of life, right? Like, if your goals are the most important thing in your world, this is literally life or death. This has to happen. And for some people that we get the privilege to support them on their journey, it can be the difference between life or death. It can be the difference as to whether someone is able to start a family that they never thought they could have, or achieve a level of energy availability when they're tired all the time. That is massive quality of life, and it's always going to be a stepping stone of choosing your hard, essentially. It's the relationship, like we named, in terms of making making sure that your headspace and how you feel within those tools and processes are really honest conversations as well. But ultimately, it comes from an education piece. To look at a plate of food, a meal that's put down, and be able to identify what that actually is going into your body. To be able to have those tools at your disposal to read a nutrition label and actually understand what energy availability looks like within your world, versus essentially stepping into nutrition with an element of blinkers on, or only going with the education that is being taught to us by questionable sources, some states. It's also a great place to be able to learn and educate in the fact that nearly every single thing that we consume that does not have air or water has energy attached to it. So every single thing you consume, like you named, Nikki, like condiments and adding spices, all create energy availability and therefore add calories into your world. I feel like calories is a word that's been given a negative connotation around, I guess, the fad dieting industry, especially, you know, for me, I'm a 90s baby, so I grew up early 2000s with all of the conversations around eating enough, or, you know, you're too fat, you're too thin, you know, looking at TV shows that expose things like that, you know, the eras of America's Next Top Model and, you know, the movies like Mean Girls and the things that just popped up that we didn't really realize what was being taught to us from such a young age. We see it constantly in the evolution and the changes of fads, essentially. You know, skinny talk is a big thing for 2026. You know, we see the other end of the spectrum in terms of the rise of love and dedication to achieving goals to the highest fitness levels in the world, the eras of these incredibly powerful women like Tia Claire Toomey, the world's fittest women, you know, training through her pregnancy. And I think that's a really powerful space to be able to step into. But when we look at tracking, when we look at nutrition, we have to look at the individual and their goals, their relationship around food, and really truly what level of importance do we need to step into to be able to put focal points around nutrition. There has to be a fluidity. You do not need to track forever, but having that level of education and understanding, if we don't know what we're actually educated around, what we're actually eating, then how to step into an element of something like intuitive eating becomes really challenging, because we're always going to be driven by our innate nature of what our body thinks it wants, which generally as women is tied to emotions, especially when it comes to hormonal regulation, like menstrual cycle changes, and in particular things like FOMO, weekend sabotage, you know, feeling like you're left out because maybe you were the one person in the group that said no to the ice cream and everybody else had ice cream.
And I think on that topic of weekend sabotage, I think in order for you to know from a weekly standpoint where you're sitting at with your energy intake and relating that back to your goals, you need to have that education and have to track. But I also want to encourage that sometimes we want to live life, and that shouldn't be something that shouldn't be something that we have to fear. But in saying that, it can be a detriment to your goals if we are finding that we're having a little bit over what we're having on 7 or 5 days out of the week, including the weekends. And I had a really good conversation with one of my ladies about the weekend. She's in Darwin. The weather is beautiful. Jealous, by the way. And she said there's going to be a lot of dry season events where she would like to have some alcohol. And I said, amazing that you want to do that. You've communicated to me. Let's jump on a call and let's actually discuss what that looks like. And we discussed, in order for me to support you as your coach and make sure it's as tailored as possible, and you're working towards your goals, but you're also living life, I need to know what your weekend looks like. So that means tracking all your food, tracking all your alcohol, so we can look from a weekly standpoint. And I think I love to look at the week in terms of goals or in terms of actionable things for my clients. I try not to focus on the day-to-day things, because day-to-day things can be so different, but focusing on the weekly things. As long as we're sitting in the caloric deficit for the week, including your alcohol on the weekends, you're still going to lose body fat. Alcohol does come with a few extra recovery practices that I like to encourage, but in order to know whether you're stepping in to your goals with the food that you are having, including the weekend, needs to be accounted for.
And I think that's a really important point that you raised there, Nikki, is because when we talk about weekend sabotage, it tends to come with not just food, it comes with other things. We went out on the weekend, you know, the sneaky kebab at 2 o'clock in the morning, like we've all been there, right? But all of these things add up. So all of a sudden you are wondering why you feel stuck, because you're nailing, you know, your goals, you're nailing this deficit from Monday through to Friday, and you may be hitting, let's call it 1,600 calories, you know, I hate giving numbers, but for the purpose of this educational point, you know, we might be hitting about 1,600 calories Monday to Friday, and then on the weekends, we're pushing 2,500, 3,000 calories each day. Automatically, we've pretty much undone an element of our caloric deficit for running into the week. I think there always has to be exception to the rules, but if you are stepping into a goal that you truly is important, that you really want to achieve, that unfortunately it may mean saying no to some things or saying yes to a whole level of education to be able to understand how to do both and to be able to step in. At the end of the day, we are all adults here, to step into an element of informed consent. What are you choosing to do? How does that affect your body? And how are you going to feel about it afterwards?
100%.
Yeah.
So our next topic in this topic is protein. There is so
Oh,
much
that word.
protein, doesn't it? Just it just sets you on fire in some good and bad some ways.
What gets me going with protein is that protein is so vitally important for our human physiology, for the way that we function. It is not a new thing, but protein has become such a marketing ploy and such a buzzword. Everything has protein in it now. It's protein fortified across the board, which has to come with the reiteration of you have to be your own advocate for your health. Now, if you pick up a product and it says that it's high in protein and you know how to read a nutrition label and you have a look at that label and it has less protein than it has anything else in this particular product, it is not a source of protein.
Yep, 100%.
Straight up.
The marketing ploy is everywhere. It's on social media. It's in the supermarkets, and that's where education comes into play. Like you said about reading nutritional labels, it's really not that hard to read one. You just look for the protein on the back, how many serves you're having, you'll be able to work it out.
If it's stuck to work it out, reach out to us. Let us help you understand how to be able to read a nutrition label, because your world of nutrition is going to totally open up. It is a massive, massive thing to be able to learn and actually understand what is in your food, especially if it comes with a label or in a packet.
And protein is like your body, every single process in your body needs protein. So in terms of, I don't want to say one macro is better than the other, but protein is incredibly important, and most of the time we see women not hitting enough protein. So definitely, if you need any help with how to read a nutritional label, what's the best sort of protein, where do I get it from, definitely hit us up. But protein is the number one thing I see women not eating enough of.
100%. And just to clarify, we're not talking about protein as in have more shakes in your world. Now, not all protein is created equally, and we're talking about protein macronutrient. So for example, 100 grams of chicken breast has 30 grams of protein macronutrient inside of it, is created by. But something like the whole food protein source, or in this example, chicken breast, is going to take a lot longer for your body to be able to break down and give a whole different level of nutrient density to it and satiation levels. It helps keep you fuller for longer than what something like a protein shake will. Especially when we're looking at supplementation. Supplementation in protein can come in many different forms. So if you feel that you're not hitting your allocated or what your body really needs to perform optimally as a protein target, shakes and bars are generally not the answer.
However, on that note, if you're starting from a baseline and if you're going to hit your protein by having a shake or having a bar, have the damn thing.
Oh, it's not a demonization at all. They are good.
Yeah.
And like, you can get some good protein bars out there, but if you're eating something to be able to hit your protein from a supplementation point, and you're also not supporting it from a whole food base, we have to look at what is happening from an optimal level.
100%.
I know, firstly, I'll be the first person to admit I have a protein shake every single day. And I do so because, one, I actually really enjoy the taste of it. I put it in a smoothie, so a scoop of protein in my smoothie with whole foods as well. But also two, because I know that I don't naturally, from my diet, get some of the amino acids that are available in something like a whey-based protein, because I follow a predominantly plant-based diet. So I know that I'm lacking something there, and protein supplementation definitely helps to fill in the gaps.
100%. So probably a loaded question, but listeners are probably asking, well, how much protein should I be having?
Completely.
And I think this comes with the caveat of, in order to accurately know how much protein you're currently having, you need to track, weigh, measure your food in something like MyFitnessPal or Chronometer. Because you might be like, oh yeah, I'm having 100 grams of chicken, but as Steph just said, that doesn't necessarily equal 100 grams of protein.
Yeah. And that you may be surprised that there's protein in things you didn't expect. You know, like I just shared, my diet is predominantly plant-based. So in terms of getting protein into my world, it doesn't come from things like meat and chicken. I have a lot of, so I follow a predominantly vegetarian-based diet. So I still have animal products, which means a lot of my protein sources come from things like eggs and cottage cheese. But it also comes a lot from things like nuts and seeds and beans and legumes. And one of my favorite protein dense vegetables is actually broccoli. And that may be super surprising for, you know, many of you listening as well, that protein is in your vegetables. And that can be a really easy way to be able to add some extra protein into your life and some extra really positive gut microbiome supporting things like fruits and vegetables, and to be able to get an extra fiber element into your world. It doesn't mean that you have to go hang out at the butcher's every single day and ensure that you're eating meat for every meal to be able to hit your protein allocations.
Personally, for me and my goals, I feel the best on 130 to 140 grams of protein per day. That doesn't just mean 140 grams of chicken, to reiterate, but that comes from, I am a meat eater, so I get usually most of my protein from my eggs in the morning and chicken usually for lunch, and then having beef or some iron-rich meat in the end of the day. I also love to put some collagen into my coffee, which just helps to boost that protein a little bit more.
I'm really glad that you mentioned your collagen in your coffee, because actually that's something that I've been leaning into recently too. So there'll be curiosity. Do you mind sharing with everyone why you put collagen in your coffee? I know you've been doing it for a really, really, really long time, and your go-to recipe.
Yeah, so I have been putting collagen in my coffee for as long as I can remember. I wouldn't say I'm a lover of coffee, but I do love a mocha or a caramel latte. But I've been putting collagen in my coffee for so long. I started with the Australian Gel Pro brand, and then I've just, in the meantime, run out of that, so I bought one from Coles. But I really love it because you're getting your coffee hit. It doesn't taste like you're adding any protein powder or extra anything in it. Just tastes like a normal coffee. And the collagen that I get from Gel Pro actually has 14 grams of protein per serve. And I think it's a really easy way and simple way to be able to boost your morning, especially if we're focusing on increasing your protein intake. It's literally flavorless. You put in your coffee if you have a coffee or a hot chocolate or even a tea. It's a great way to start your morning. And we also know that coffee is really great for you in terms of the antioxidants and the beans that it comes from. But adding collagen allows you to just have that little bit extra protein. Collagen is actually really good for your hair, skin, and nails too, which I also love. But I think it's it doesn't feel as heavy as a protein powder if I was to put that in my coffee. And I find it just gives me that coffee as quick as possible in the morning if I'm having a coffee before breakfast or whatever it may be. If you're on your journey and you don't currently or am not able to stomach breakfast in the morning and you have a coffee, it's a great way to be able to boost your protein intake without having to change your whole schedule.
Absolutely, and I know that that's a challenge for, well, many of us some days, you know, waking up and be like, I just do not feel hungry. Like, how am I meant to get this protein into my breakfast, especially as women, you know, trying to get as much protein into our days as quickly as we possibly can post waking up to be able to help our nervous system recenter, re-regulate. I think that's a really cool tip and trick, and I'm really glad that you shared that. Also, to name the fact that, as you have named, like, collagen, right? So collagen still counts, and you know, it's still categorized as a protein powder. Not all protein powders are exactly the same. They can be made from different sources, hence why we see things like vegan protein, which can come from peas and almonds and peanuts, and we see things like WPI or WPC, which is whey protein isolate, whey protein concentrate, which generally comes from milk-based sources. So finding something that works for you, something that you can utilize, you know, as a supplement to be exactly that. It supplements a healthy, balanced diet, and maybe it makes life a little bit easier, especially on the days where we need to lean into that lowest hanging fruit versus, you know, sitting down to a big old plate of eggs first thing in the morning.
I definitely love how you acknowledge the fact that everybody's got to find out what they like. I know some people listening may not agree with the fact that collagen is the best form of like protein or supplement, but for me, it doesn't make me bloat, doesn't make me feel heavy within the gut, and it's really good to add into my coffee. So I personally enjoy this, but you've got to find out what works best for you.
Yeah, absolutely that. And finding what works best for you and also balances in with what you're already consuming. You know, for myself, I actually lean into a marine-based collagen because I don't eat fish and I don't eat seafood. So I know that that's something that I'm completely lacking from my diet, which brings in a whole different level of possibilities of micronutrients, those vitamins, minerals, amino acids that are being broken down into the body and supported that I will not be obtaining from my food. And that is really powerful to be able to understand, you know, what are you getting in at the moment? What are you doing really, really well? And then how do we build on that? Again, to be able to work towards that optimal level versus, you know, just staying where we are, doing the same thing and expecting a different result.
Yeah, 100%.
And I think that flows into like chasing perfection, yeah? Like we feel like we need to be doing all the perfect things all the time, and I need to be hitting my protein to its highest levels every day. And I am the first to admit, I just had the most beautiful privilege of spending the last week in Bali with my friends and my family, and that was just so special to my world. And I know for a fact that I did not hit my protein every single day that I was over there. I opted for the beautiful smoothie bowl over, you know, the eggs on toast for breakfast on quite a few occasions. But I also understood my choices as I stepped into it too. I understand what I was asking from my body, where I was making choices that could support the best I possibly could with the things I had access to. In particular in Southeast Asia, that looks like things like tempeh and tofu, but also understanding that these are not pure protein sources, that they come with an element of another macronutrient too. So noticing your choices, what you naturally will lean into, and then maybe on the days where you have a balance of both, having the smoothie bowl and also having some egg whites on the side. Or as I traveled to Japan earlier in the year, noting that it was going to be quite a carbohydrate dense environment, I actually traveled with protein powder myself, and being able to start each day with a protein shake before I flowed into what I was eating in the rest of the days too. And having those two very different experiences, one where I was resourceful, I was prepared, I was focusing on my protein, and the other where I was a little bit more free and a little bit more flowing, and I definitely didn't hit that protein allocation. I felt the difference within my body, and neither point was perfection, but both points gave an element of understanding, education, and choice as to what I stepped into in which different environments. But I definitely didn't feel as amazing when I didn't focus on my nutrition and being able to support my nervous system as when I did. And that definitely motivated the choices as soon as I came back home. Like, I click and collected everything ready to go before we even landed back from our trip in Bali, because I was just so ready to go back to feeling as optimal as I possibly can at the moment.
100%. And if any of the listeners have listened to episode 1, you will hear me say that I don't believe in perfection. I don't believe it's a thing, because how can we compare somebody else's perfection to what ours is? Because everybody's uniquely different. I think chasing perfection is not something that I encourage, only because, caveat, depending on your goals, will depend on how much we want to work towards that so-called perfection. But I think perfection is something that can set you up for failure when you have that goal in mind. Because if you, for example, have half a block of chocolate on a day, or don't have a meal that has as much protein as you would like it to have, your mindset and your mental demon, or the mental angels that come into play for this, the things you tell yourself is going to do your nervous system more detriment than if you just say, cool, I had a protein meal for brekkie, I didn't have any protein with my lunch because I wanted the carbs. We move on to the next day, we note that we didn't have as much protein the day before, and we just work on it as a new day and try to get that protein there.
100%. Yeah, definitely. I think that that's a great point to raise as well. Like, the amount of times I've had conversations and someone shared with me, I ate the whole block of chocolate. And my first question will always be, was it good? Did you enjoy it? Because the stress of the impact of beating yourself up about the choices that you have made will play more of a role for your nervous system than what the food itself actually may do for your body. Ultimately, food is just energy. And if we can use that energy for being able to build the most powerful version of ourselves, amazing. If it was a moment of learning and lessons, amazing. Because either way, you gained something from it. And it can all come from a lens of growth.
And I think on that beautiful segue from not always chasing perfection, why consistency is generally better for you and better for your body than chasing perfection every single day. I think for me, it goes into that kind of mental space thing, like when we talked about our non-negotiables in episode 3. Consistency is always going to win over perfection, because you're doing it consistently and your body's adapting to what you're doing. If you're doing one thing, then you're doing another thing, your body has to adapt to whatever you're changing up. So making sure that when you are setting your goals, maybe for yourself with tracking or hitting your protein, that you aim for something that is achievable and something that is going to be fluid, but also that you can do consistently.
Absolutely. And I think that's a big thing that keeps people stuck, is that consistency point of, I've had a bad day, and so therefore, stuff it. I might as well just continue on like the rest of the week. Or, I had one meal and then now I'm going to flow into the rest of the day. Enjoy your meal, enjoy your time off, enjoy having that moment with the people that you love, and then step back into those habits, the processes, the things that have served you to be able to get you where you want to be ultimately. Because at the end of the day, we are all setting our own goals in the pathway that we'd like to be able to shape our lives around. And therefore it becomes a positive choice. You chose to do this. No one is forcing anything to happen right now. You're stepping into your power and your choices around nutrition, whichever way that may be. Even if it comes from a place of being able to support your health, the choice may be the fact that you want to be on the planet for longer. So therefore, these things that you step into with as much consistency as you possibly can is always going to get us to where we want to be. I love the thought pattern, especially when we're talking about consistency around the 80-20 rule. So to anyone that hasn't heard of the 80-20 rule before, the 80-20 rule basically looks like 80% whole foods and 20% soul foods. It's a general lifestyle approach which looks at 80% of our diet being as nutrient dense, whole food, I know what this looks like and where it came from type nutrition, and then having 20% of life. To have the chocolate, to have the ice cream, to enjoy the meal that doesn't have protein in it, to have the cake because it's your birthday. But that balance of being able to step into an element of both also helps with the consistency levels, because never at any point do we feel restricted.
100%. I think for the listeners, something that we want you to take away from this episode is that nutrition seems complicated and seems complex, but we really don't have to make it any more complicated to be able to achieve your goals. We want to make sure we're fueling not too much, but not too little, making sure it's tailored to you, and making sure that we're hitting those macronutrients in order for us to feel and perform optimally. And it's different with every single person. It's not always going to look the same. It's not something that we just, okay, you're onboarded into Jug Fit, we just give you 1,600 calories. That's not how we work as coaches. And I think that's something that you have to be very mindful of when you are looking for a coach. Is we teach you the education for you to be able to make your own decisions in where you want to step into. I know a bunch of times my clients have come to me and said, hey Nikki, I'm not tracking this week. I don't have my devil is coming up and I don't have a good relationship with this week. I'm not tracking. And I was like, okay, cool. Can we send food photos? There's always another way to be able to make sure you're still fueling for performance and for optimal recovery. But it looks different for everyone. So try not to make it as complicated as people make it out to be.
And the biggest thing with that as well, and I think the best point to be able to wrap this up on, is you don't have to do this alone. If it does feel heavy and it feels hard and it feels complicated, and especially as we've been talking about, the emotional element is showing up so much more than we can possibly look at habits, routines, or things from a non-biased lens, then work with someone else. Help to ask for help to be able to understand what these tools look like, and some different education. It doesn't necessarily just have to be us, but it may be leaning into someone like a dietitian or a psychologist, an allied health professional, a nutritionist, a naturopath, to be able to understand on a deeper level what nutrition looks like for you, but also to be able to debunk some of the rules that we may have put upon ourselves or that we have learnt innately from the people around us as well. Nutrition does not have to be something that is big and scary. It's definitely not something that needs to have a control over you or to make you feel stuck. But we all step into it with a different level and a different relationship. So making sure that you get the support that you need at whichever part of the journey you are on.
100%. And if you have any questions, I know we talked about a few different topics about what sort of nutrition, I suppose, habits may be keeping you stuck, or nutritional mistakes we see a lot of women make. Please hit us up. Juggernaut Fitness on Facebook, jug.fitness on Instagram. Please send us a DM. We are more than happy to just send you a couple voice notes in Instagram, or reply to your message, or jump on a call. We just want to help educate and support you in any which way we can. No matter if you are coaching with us or you just want to ask a question, please reach out. I promise you we're not scary, and I hope you have a most unstoppable day.
Thanks, guys. See you next time.